My name is Pailin Waddell. I'm the Vice President here at the Foreign Correspondents Club of Thailand. Thank you for coming. Before we begin, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the other events we're having this month. There's so much good stuff coming up. We are now having regular film nights, which we will feature mostly documentaries. And this first quarter, we're emphasizing documentaries from Asia and the developing world. Our Monday night film had quite a big turnout. I think over 200 people were here. So really big deal, and we're really excited about this new film nights we have every Monday. We also have an event about Thailand's deadly roads coming up, quite a timely topic with the minivan violent crash a couple of weeks ago. So we'll have a panel talking about the deadly roads and why and who's responsible for them. That's coming up as well. And then we also have coming up in a couple of weeks an event about Trump and getting pundits in the region to pontificate about what kinds of effects he might have on Asia. So lots of exciting things going on. And as always, if you like what we're doing here, there are membership forms at the desk at the front of the club. And if you have any questions, Dominic, our president, is here tonight, and I'm here as well. Please don't hesitate to ask. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you two really great women, and they should not be any stranger to the club because both of them have served on the board at the FCCT, so this is a bit of a homecoming for both of them before they go off to new adventures. And they've been spending the past almost year, right? Doing what the people in this room who are journalists secretly want to do, which is to take some time off of your daily jobs and spend a year discovering and exploring a country that has been so unknown to the media for so long. And here they are here tonight to tell us about their adventures. Let me introduce Tin Lay Win. Myanmar is Thin's home. She was born and raised in Yangon and has maintained a strong bond with the country throughout her international journalism career. Thin set up the award-winning bilingual news agency Myanmar Now in 2015 after returning to her hometown after many years abroad working for Thomson Reuters Foundation, the nonprofit arm of Reuters news agency and specializing in humanitarian reporting. Kelly was AFP News Agency's first international news editor in Myanmar, based in Yangon from 2014 with a talented team of local journalists. She has written about Myanmar for 6 years, documenting the seismic political changes as well as the social and cultural developments that have touched ordinary people. Kelly is a writer, photographer, and video journalist with over a decade of experience in print and television news. So here they are, Thin and Kelly. Please take it away.
Thanks, Pailin. Thank you. Thanks very much. We're actually not going to be sitting behind the desk because we normally do this talk in a very informal setting, so we're just going to stand here and do that. And it's lovely to see lots of familiar faces. Like Pailin said, it feels like a bit of a homecoming because I've spent so many years in Bangkok, and I will be actually coming back here as well.
Yeah, I mean, fantastic to be here, and we've spent, as Pailin said, we took unpaid leave from our jobs in June last year, and we've been sort of mostly on the road ever since then, which has been enormous fun and such a privilege. One of the reasons that we did this is because straight news reporting, which we'd both done for a long time, you travel around Myanmar and you speak to all of these incredible people, and it never quite fits in the news story that you're trying to write. You're interested in the dam being built or the ethnic armed group who's operating around the corner, but you don't have that chance to sit down and really find out what people think or what experiences they've had. And I think we found that a little bit frustrating, so we thought we'd maybe do something about it.
And I guess, as a Burmese, I thought, we should try and move a little bit away from the headlines that normally dominate whenever it comes to Myanmar, Burma, which is about the politics and the human rights abuses. As a journalist, I understand why they are the headlines. You know, I used to write those stories all the time, and they're very important stories. But we felt like that picture was incomplete. You know, Myanmar has amazing cultural and social diversity, from food to festivals to language. And we felt those things should be preserved and celebrated. And we're worried that that has not been happening, still not happening. And we wanted to change that. And you know, every monsoon we fight losing battles with mold and termite. We're constantly losing precious books and photos and documents to these elements. You know, growing up in Myanmar, every monsoon is almost like a chance to clear out your library, your, you know, albums, all the memories that you had. And we really wanted to capture that in a form that hopefully could last beyond all those weather elements.
And the other thing, of course, I mean, most people will know Myanmar's history. More than almost half a century under military rule, and very tight censorship meant that, you know, people for a really, really long time didn't have a voice. They were silenced. And now the country is in a position where it's opening up. Excuse me. It's opening up. There's particularly after the elections in 2015, there's loads more space for people to have a voice. But the country's changing so fast. People are under a lot of pressure. We just thought, well, is anyone taking the time to sit down and listen? And so we thought, well, maybe that could be us. Maybe we could use our skills in some way to help create what we've kind of calling a digital archive of memories. I mean, it's never going to be exhaustible. We're not saying that we're going to create this, like, you know, total picture of Myanmar, but at least, you know, you go some way to starting a conversation about diversity and about preservation. And so what we thought we'd do is we've taken loads of video, loads of photographs from our trips, and we thought we'd show you a little kind of interactive slideshow, kind of. I hope you enjoy it. And so we'll just play you a little bit of video at the beginning and then talk you through some of the stories. Might need a bit more volume. Oh no. This is a lady called Markwee Lainyu. She's fabulous. We met her in Sagaing State, which is the Naga, which has part of the Naga region in Myanmar. And she thinks she's about 100 years old. She's a great proponent of girls' education. She used to be a tattoo artist. As you can see, there's some examples of her designs. She told us actually that they used to do these tattoos at festivals, and she would tattoo both men and women. But it's something that the Burmese, the ethnic majority Burma government has really, really discouraged, and they would issue fines and that sort of stuff. So she says they don't do it anymore. And these are her two granddaughters, and they were completely transfixed, not only by the song, but by the stories that she was telling us, because they said, you know what, we never hear these stories. We've never heard this song before. And it was just a great reminder to us why it's good to have these conversations. Now, the reason that she was such a proponent of education is because she never went to school, and her granddaughters have been allowed to go to school, which is increasing the literacy rate loads. Hang on a sec. Just going to pause it. And that is a really big deal for the Naga region in Myanmar, because while you have literacy at around 95% in the whole country, in the Naga region, in Lehey specifically, for men it's 25%, and for women it's 16. And that's partly because they weren't allowed to go to school. And I would just press play.
This is Ngom Pok. You've seen some videos of him. Like, he's one of the very few people still left in the same town who actually knows how to weave. His house was just full of these beautiful items that he's woven himself. Now, he also happened to be a third-generation custodian of a traditional Naga song that they sing only once a year at New Year. And when you start singing, you can't stop, and that could be overnight. And that was passed down generation by generation orally. So just now you saw the book, so that was only documented in written form just very recently. But we talked about, Kelly talked about the literacy issue just now. He can't read it, he's illiterate. Part of the problem is, of course, these are remote areas that schools and education system doesn't reach for a very long time, but also because of government policy that actually stop schools from teaching ethnic languages.
This is Athway. She is also from the Naga region. She's also from Lahae. And in her weaving shop, you can find the textiles of all the local tribes. There's about 6 or 7 Naga tribes there. And she's got this great sort of sustainable method of allowing other women to learn the different techniques and then to weave around their farming work and to sell through her shop, which gives these women extra income, and it also keeps those designs alive and keeps those skills alive. We wanted to speak to a really broad, I hope that shows, we wanted to speak to a really broad selection of people to show that Naga, particularly Naga, has this reputation. They're historically headhunters, very fearsome. We wanted to show that it's more than that, more than feather headdresses and buffalo horns. That there is lots of people doing lots and lots of different jobs, who are really passionately committed to their own culture. This is actually a hunter's graveyard, and that the hunters are considered to be a very important part of society, of course, because of the remoteness of the region. And so on the outskirts of town, there's this fabulous selection of graves, all beautifully decorated with the horns of their most precious kills. So they're really still a very proud people. And you can see that they just need to be way more connected to the rest of the country.
So Lahae Naga region was the first trip that we did as the Kite Tales. The second trip was to Kaya, which is the smallest state in Myanmar, and we were fortunate to actually witness the annual Kaitobo festival, which is actually the raising of totem poles. So every year, this is a 3-day festival where they would, fell a tree in the forest, bring it over to a clearing, get it ready, and then raise it.
Now, it might not look very beautiful as it is there, but over 3 days it is blessed, it is beautified, it's sanded down, and at the end it is raised in this extremely extravagant festival, and it joins one of these hundreds of totem poles that they have in fields of them all across Kaya State. And I mean, I'd been there a couple of times and I'd never seen them before, and suddenly they were everywhere.
Now, some of you might recognize this guy. It's Pascal Couthouet, who wrote a beautiful book on Myanmar called From the Land of Green Ghosts. We were fortunate enough to spend a few days with him where he was showing us around Kaya State, including with his extended family. One of the places that he took us to was to a housewarming in a little village outside Kaya in the hills. I mean, we turned up at this newly built house and there were dozens of people preparing for a feast fit for hundreds. people cooking, chopping up meat, curries on earthen stoves. And then the owner later on told us that they actually cooked, I think, 10 chickens, 2 pigs, and a cow.
And they also had a rather dramatic shooting contest for the prize of a can of beer and a hunk of meat, which everyone enjoyed. I say everyone enjoyed, not everyone enjoyed. And then we were quite mesmerized because out of nowhere, the neighboring village came to join in the party.
You know, we traveled far and wide along the length and breadth of the country to try and find these stories. This was a boat trip that we did from southern Shan State on the border with Kaya to Inle, which is obviously a well-known tourist destination. And this was in Lehe in Naga. Getting there was actually really challenging, even in the best of times. And we were slightly unlucky because there were unseasonal rains, which led to landslides. So we had to abandon our car and take motorbikes for quite an adventurous 6-hour ride on these roads.
But it wasn't all out in the, on the in the border regions. There are stories in Yangon as well. This chap, I mean, if you've been to Yangon a lot, you probably know him. His name's Ong So Min. He runs the Pansadan Gallery in Yangon, and he's a fantastic proponent of keeping cultural treasure, and he's just been collecting stuff in his own gallery for years. I mean, the place is stacked full of old movie posters, maps of the city, everything. I mean, there's no proper museums. I mean, there's a national museum, but everything has been sort of saturated by state propaganda. So there's no museum that really reflects life of ordinary people. And so he is one of the several people who's been sort of creating these mini museums in his own collection. And one of the things that we've been asking everyone, or nearly everyone we interviewed, was, what do you think is your most precious possession? I mean, it doesn't have to be something that you necessarily own or something of value, but something that you think should be passed on to the next generation. And the answers have been really, really fascinating. Everything from an ID card for an itinerant worker to family heirlooms. And Ong So Min chose this rather unusual painting, and it's from the late 1890s, just at the beginning of British colonial rule. And this chap he's definitely in colonial service, and the way that you can tell that is that he's wearing a fur coat, he has a British bulldog, he generally seems to be doing quite well for himself. But the thing that Ong So Min told me about this that I just was fascinated by, if you look closely, you can see that the face, the hands, and the dog are all painted in black and white. Now, he was telling me that the reason for this is just about that time, popular photography was becoming accessible to ordinary people, and it was all in black and white. So people were thinking, oh, this is how you show something as being realistic. It didn't last very long as a sort of painting phase, but it was, in a brief moment, a popular technique. Ong So Min has been fantastic, and we've worked with him actually on an exhibition in Yangon last year, where we basically went street to street in a small area, asking people to give old photographs, and we did a few interviews, and it was really interesting. The booksellers of two streets in Yangon, the movie makers who work in another street. But one thing he told us, which I think really resonated for us, is that it's just fantastic. He just said, the real history lies among the people. And, we just thought, oh, it's such a kindred spirit, because that really encompasses what we hope to achieve. And to kind of prove this, this is a story that we did in Mandalay, and we thought what we could do would be a kind of an anatomy of a tea shop. Now, tea shops are nearly always staffed by kids. And so what we did, there's a great project called the My Me Education Project. They do mobile education for kids who are in this situation. And we spoke to this one 14-year-old. He said he was 14. I mean, he looked pretty young. And he, works every day from 4 in the morning until often, somewhere near midnight, to send home money for his mother. His father died. His mum's remarried. He's supporting his grandparents and his little brother. And he was so bright and so, so engaged that, you kind of find it hard to, it's tough to speak to a kid like that and to try and work out what their options could be in the future. And he's one of very many, right? So Mandalay region alone, 1 in 10 kids is working. And that's often agricultural labor. So he actually said, well, I'm kind of lucky, because if I was back in the village, I'd be doing manual work. So, I mean, it's a really tough situation to be in, and MyMe tries to teach them skills that will be useful to them. English, for example, if they're dealing with tourists, basic maths, hygiene, that sort of stuff. But he had a most precious possession. I don't know if you can guess what that might be. And he managed to save up for this mobile phone, and he uses it to call his mum or to call the village. And he's actually used it to call us. And we've kept in touch with him, and he's told us he's, every time he kind of does well in a test and that sort of thing. And we, it's a little thing, but we like to think that he has hopefully a better future.
So from a 14-year-old to an octogenarian, this is an 86-year-old artist called Ue Mian. I called him Baba Ue Mian. He was one of the other people that we met when we were in Mandalay, and he's one of the very few remaining artists who have dedicated their whole life to traditional Burmese art. He grew up during the World War II era and went to one of the first painting schools in this country. In our country, he's known for actually designing some of the stamps and banknotes during the Ne Win dictatorship era, because he joined the small cottage industries department, which is the name of the government department. But he has done so much more than that. When we asked him what was his most precious possession, he was quite unwell, failing eyesight, bad health, but he forced us to, he was like, no, get me up, I want to go to the back, I want to show you this. And these are a series of drawings that he's done of temples in Bagan when he visited in 1971. So this was way before any of the renovations done by the military junta had happened. And, I'm not sure whether you're aware, but last year there was an earthquake that affected Bagan quite badly. Some of the temples were badly affected by it, and he was saying, really want to show these drawings to either the UNESCO or the government, so that if they really want to go back and look at what it used to look like, this is what it is. So we're trying to find, a way of contacting UNESCO. So if any of you know anybody from there, we'd be happy to talk to you. Another thing that he used to do was actually to write, to draw covers for Yedanamo magazine, which is a monthly Buddhist magazine that was published by the Young Men's Buddhist Association, which is the largest Buddhist organization in Myanmar. And, it was serendipitous, I don't know what you'd call it, maybe that. I grew up seeing these magazines my whole life because my grandfather was the head of YMBA until he passed away. But I had no idea who was the painter behind those covers until 3 months ago when I turned up at his porch. and realize, oh my God, so these are the drawings that I grew up with. And I think in those moments, that's when I realized that, the Kite Tales is a project that we want to do for the country of Myanmar, but also in many ways extremely personal, because I've always regretted not being able to interview my own grandfather. So this is my grandpa with my grandma, I think sometime in the 50s, in front of Mount Fuji. I have no clue what they were doing there, how they get there, but it was one of the pictures that turned up when, I was going through old family photo albums. I grew up hearing snippets of Grandpa's fascinating life. He was a young student, a contemporary of Aung San, a self-made man, became a movie producer, a philanthropist, head of the Buddhist Association, how they had to flee the Japanese and hid it in temple in Bagan, how he lost quite a lot of his movie theaters when Ne Win nationalized, staged the coup and nationalized everything. But I always thought, Grandpa will always be there, which is what you think when you're growing up, when you're young. And then, of course, I had to leave the country because universities closed down and I wasn't going to get an education if I was going to stay there. Grandpa passed away within 2 years of me leaving Myanmar. And I've regretted to this day that I didn't sit down and ask him, what was it like? And I don't think it's just me who has these regrets. I think there are a lot of people of my generation, of even generation older than me in Myanmar, who have the same regrets. Because for a very long time, history was something you can't talk about because it's dangerous. A word out of place could land you in jail. So sometimes families prefer not to talk about it. And I think, that's also one of the reasons why we think it's really urgent that we now try and record as many of these stories as we possibly can. So even though I couldn't record my grandpa's story, we were able to speak to so many people, so many interesting memories and histories, and record them, including, this is my great aunt. She's 97. She lives in Mandalay. And when we were actually in Mandalay, it was a friend who told us, you should actually speak to your great aunt. She has a great recipe for ngapije. So ngapije, for those who don't know, is actually a fermented fish curry with lots of tomatoes. It's a staple in a Burma home, and every house have their own variations and recipes of it. Apparently, this particular recipe became famous because a very, very well-respected writer in Myanmar wrote about it in a magazine, I think in the 80s, and then people replicated it, supposedly, across the country. So what did we do? Well, we went and saw my great aunt, and we made a little video about it. So we're gonna play that in just a few seconds. that's our little presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thin, Kelly. I think we're going to open up the floor for some questions. I'm sure I see a few journalists here, so I'm sure there's questions out there. We might need to use one of your mics to pass around for the questions. And the rules of the house is basically that when you do ask a question, please introduce yourself, who you are. If you're with an outlet, let us know who you're with. And please stick to a question and not a statement, as well as limit it to a question per person. So anybody want to ask a question? Great.
Peter Jansen. I'm a journalist based here in Bangkok. I'm just wondering, I don't know how many of the states you went to, but just sort of a journalistic question. Were there any restrictions on your travel, or could you basically go anywhere you wanted to go, or how's the liberty of travel nowadays? Yeah?
It's a little bit more complicated if you're with me, I think. Thin can go everywhere, so I don't know if these are working. But yeah, Thin can go everywhere. Even for Naga, we kind of just showed up. They weren't hugely pleased by us just showing up, but they were okay. Actually, we started just at the beginning of the government's 100-day, the new government. So there was a great sense that things are changing, and actually there was this fabulous young Naga guy who kind of asked to stay a little bit behind the scenes, but he was an official there who'd actually sorted our travel, our accommodation out. And when the local GAD, which are the sort of government officials, sort of turned up and started to make noises about it, he basically just told them, things have changed now, we're not doing it that way anymore. He didn't actually stay in his store, but that's nothing to do with us. Yeah, like I think you're starting to get new people, and that you can push a little bit further, I think, and there's no reason for that area to be restricted. There's no fighting going on around there.
So you avoided like Shan's Day?
Well, we did go to.
We went to Shan, yeah,
We did
southern
go to
and
southern
northern.
as well as the northern. We went to Lashu and Seaport.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, those areas, since we've been, have become a bit more unstable. And when we were, our most recent, I guess, last trip was Kachin, and that was quite restrictive. I mean, we decided, not to push too much as well, because there is active fighting going on in the area. So, we went to Indoor G, and then there are particular places that you can't go. It's quite close to Pakat, so it's a heavily restricted area. But we've been to pretty much all the states except Rakhine, and with the exception of Kachin and in Naga, when the GAD tried to sort of says, do you have a special permit to come here? We haven't had any problems at all, actually.
Yep, Elisa. There's a mic in the back now. So if you can line up behind that mic, that will help us out a little bit. Maybe there isn't a mic in the back. Just need a change of batteries. Stand by.
Hi, Elisa Tang with the Thomson Reuters Foundation, and thanks so much, you guys. I was just wondering how you went about choosing your subjects. For example, the first woman. I mean, do you just show up in a village and look for the oldest person, or do you show up and look for, ask around for who's the most interesting person? Or
Well, it's a combination of planning and luck. I think a lot of journalists, this is something I think all the journalists are familiar with. We try and plan as much as we can, and then sometimes, we struck gold with Naga, with the lady that we met with Markwe Lai Nhu. She was actually accidental. We've already interviewed pretty much everybody that we wanted to, because we were like, okay, we wanted, somebody who knows the history, somebody young, somebody old, male, female, and then we got stuck in Lahore because of those rains, unseasonal rains, and we couldn't go back to Kamti. So we thought, since we're staying there an extra day, why don't we try and speak to at least one more person? And we were like, you know, so we interviewed this lady. I'm not sure whether you can see. So the lady at the bottom, you know, the picture, Chekom, we interviewed her first. And it was such an interesting story that we thought, you know, we want to interview another elderly lady again. And it just happened to be Markwi Lainu. And we've been asking so many people just to like, could you sing us a song or, you know, a poem? And the Ngom Pok, the guy that we interviewed who's the custodian of the traditional song, he said, no, we have to, you know, make offerings to the spirits before we could actually sing. And once we start singing that song, we can't stop until the song ends. And it usually lasts for about 12 hours. So we thought, okay, that's
Not very convenient.
yeah,
for the
that's not going to
interview.
work. And, you know, when we were talking to Markwi Lainu, I think we asked something like, you know, do you have a song, like a common
old
song that you normally sing? And she's like, yes, I do. And just started singing. And luckily we had 2 cameras. We're like, no, hang on. Let's, you know, set up our cameras first. And yeah.
Yeah, and that was a song, I think she said it was her parents had taught it to her. So, I mean, that's, you know, coming down through the generations. Yeah, but I think just to add a little bit, we've had this amazing network of people around the country, often young people, and you know it's kind of interesting because we're often interviewing people who are older, but you know places like Penuluin, where we spoke to a lot of people from the Gurkha community, where else? Also in Lahore. We've had great local contacts with young people, and some of whom have actually come with us to the interviews and have just been like, wow, you know, we had no idea, you know, or I think they've sort of secretly wanted us to I think particularly actually the one in Penuluin, they were like, yeah, let's interview this guy, you know, just to try and, you know, I think they were interested to know what he knew and what he had to say, but you know, it's very hierarchical and you respect your elders, so you don't necessarily sort of normally ply them with questions.
Yeah, and you know, it's a good pretense for the 2 of us to be there, and then we're like, no, this is what we're doing, so we want to, and you know, we would normally spend at least half an hour, sometimes an hour and a half, 2 hours, with just one, you know, interviewee, and that's a luxury that we don't normally get in our day-to-day journalism jobs, you know, where all we use are 2 quotes. So that's been great.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Oh, yep.
I'm Karen. I don't associate kite flying with Myanmar. So what's the story behind the title? And then just for you, Ten, because it's your country, and having been all around, what's something you learned from about something different, unexpected? What do you take away from your country? And Kelly, for you as the outsider who's been there quite a while and going in and out of there for so long, what new thing did you discover?
Okay.
Well, okay, let's start with the name, the Kite Tales. So if you look at the map of Myanmar, it looks like a kite. If you look at it as a whole of Myanmar, and you know, so we had a play with the tails. It looks like, you know, and the Tanindai looks like a little bit of a tail, so the southern Myanmar. So it was a play on words, a play on the geography. We went through a gamut of names, you know, we're like, and some of which are a lot more obvious, like, you know, Myanmar something, trying to put Myanmar in the name. And then we decided to go a little bit left field and go for the Kite Tales, which is slightly unexpected. And we love it when people ask what's with the name, because then that's a nice little story to talk about. Traveling with it, yeah, it's been fascinating because there are lots of places that I've been wanting to go to since I was young, but they were considered black areas. So those were areas where there was insurgency, you know, you couldn't go. And I finally am able to go to some of these border areas and speak to people. I wouldn't say it's not, you know, it's not something unexpected, but I think it's just come away. Made me come away with the realization there's just so much more I need to learn, even of my own country.
and what an amazing diversity we have, and how proud I am of it. And I want everybody else to be proud of it as well. And I worry that that's not happening. You know, ethnic conflict is still a major issue. And I think, you know, I'm a Burma, so I'm a majority ethnic group. And I think a lot of the Burma, you know, who live in the central and the lowlands, just tend to have very little idea of what life is like in the border regions and what life is like for the ethnic. And hopefully, one good thing, if there's one good thing that we could do with the Kite Tales, is to make sure that people understand what it is like, because otherwise we're not going to have peace.
I was going to say diversity as well, but now that you've stolen it, sorry. I think surprises is that there is so much history around every single corner. It's everywhere, and it's not, you just, even just doing the Yangon, a little bit of the project that we did with Aung San Suu Kyi that I mentioned briefly, we literally went, I mean, it must have been about 4 blocks.
Yeah.
And we got, stories about the booksellers, stories about sort of movie makers. And one of the things that came from that was how much cult effect, it really squeezed an already, struggling creative industry after the 1988 coup. Protests, not coup. Because after Ne Win took power in 62, all the nationalizations had already made things super, super difficult for filmmakers, producers like Finn's grandfather, even photographers. You had to apply to the government to get the movie reels. You had to apply to the government to get your film for your camera. So that was already pretty tricky. But then after the mass protests in '88, further censorship, further problems, and to the extent that the movie industry and the cinema industry effectively collapsed for a while. And those guys on 35th and 36th Streets in Yangon became video producers, because the cinemas weren't open, they couldn't even show their films in cinemas anyway. And so they were then making films to take to the countryside, and they would show that, and they would show them in little
video houses,
makeshift video houses all around the country. And it just, story after story, just shows how the government really tightened its grip on the creative industries as well. They weren't making political films. I mean, just everything was affected.
Yep, please.
Oh, sorry. Oh, there's a mic at the front.
Yeah.
Sorry. No, it's working.
Go ahead.
My name's Jeffrey Goddard. I work for Myanmar Times, Mizima, and Frontier Myanmar. When I first went there in 2001, as you will probably be aware, the fear about speaking, including to people from the media, was almost palpable. Did you find that one of your challenges was getting people to talk?
Actually, no. That was one of the least, what would you say, least challenges? In fact, if I remember correctly, only one person has turned us down, and that wasn't even somebody who was in Myanmar. Thank you. There was somebody who was outside the country. Infrastructure actually was one of the biggest challenges to try and just get to the places that we wanted to go to. But when we, actually sat down and talked to people, this is what we're trying to do. People were really willing and open and interested. I think, we do try and say that, look, what we're trying to do is not a political thing. We're trying to preserve memories and histories, and we want ordinary people's lives to be documented.
Yeah, exactly.
But we just say it's ordinary people's lives, and a lot of the times, in fact, except for that one particular rejection, we didn't have any problems.
What about harassment from TAG
Other than getting followed around a bit in the hay, generally I think I can't remember any other instance where we've had a problem. And it's useful actually that there are loads of tourists now kind of pushing out into those areas, because people just don't really, and we're wanting to do cultural stuff, so we're like videoing people making food, and so we don't stand out too much, and you're having a private conversation in someone's home. One thing that I was just going to add to what you were saying about people being nervous, we did have one instance where a family member of one of the people we interviewed said, look, there's one bit, can you not write it? Because he was arrested, kept under house arrest, he's in his 90s. We know that the government has changed, but, please, let's not push it. Of course, we respected the family's wishes. It wasn't integral to the piece anyway, but of course, we keep all of this for the future, so that people, it will be there. We're keeping all the sound recordings, everything, all the transcripts. So, at some point in the future, that will.
Can I ask one more really?
Yeah.
Is there any support from the government for cultural preservation work?
They're speaking to the British Council, I believe,
to try
about
and
something, but I think it's quite far down their list of priorities.
Yeah.
Okay, we have somebody else at the mic. Please go ahead.
I really enjoyed your presentation. My name is Gail Geeson. I'm an associate member. I guess that means, well, I'm not a journalist. I have two questions, actually directed to Thin. Question one is whether you were able to communicate, or how you were able to communicate to people in Naga and to people of minority groups who probably speak other languages. And the second question is, and you don't need to answer this, but was it hard for you to get out of Burma? I assume that you were educated abroad. If you are inclined to give us some of your story, I think, well, I'd love to hear it. Sure. Thank you.
I guess one of the, I don't know whether you'd say fortunate or unfortunate side effects of a centralized education system where a lot of the ethnics were not actually taught their own language at school is that even in the border regions, there's quite a few people who speak Burmese. So Naga, we actually interviewed a few younger folks who spoke Burmese, so I was able to communicate with them. When they do not speak, we always had somebody that would translate for us. And what we tried to do is we would then try and do the interview. I would be asking the questions in Burma, get translated, everything is recorded. Then what we do is when we get it transcribed, we will then find at least one, if not two more, a third party that speaks the language just to check that the translation was correct. And, inevitably there are issues. One of, or two of the interviews that we did later on after we double checked it, we realized there were lots of gaps, and that the translator was saying, oh, no, don't badmouth the Burmans, don't say bad things about, and it wasn't even about government, they weren't even bad-mouthing the government. It was just like, oh, don't say life is hard. I think part of it might be just to save face, not to say how difficult life is, but might also be because, I don't know, it's difficult to guess people's motivations. But, so we learned from it, but we're still, whenever we go, we'll always try and at least have, if they don't speak the language, a translator. And it's been, great with some of the local youth networks and things like that, that people help translate it. I mean, in Kaya, we had Ko Pascal, who spoke Kaya, English, Burmese. So he was fantastic, helped us out with a lot of the interviews. So that's the first question. The second question, to be honest, I had a very privileged upbringing. I was able to leave the country. I was able to study abroad. There were so many people who went, who didn't get that chance or the opportunity to do. I was the youngest of three. Both my brother and my sister had already left. And my mum and both my parents, both my mum and dad, didn't want to let me go because I was the youngest, and they wanted to have at least one child with them. But the universities closed when I was just starting university, and it didn't look like it was going to reopen anytime soon. This was the second time it had happened in my school life, and they just thought, if you don't leave, you're never going to have an education. You just need to go. And it is, it was difficult to, it takes a lot of money and connections to get a passport. And in those days, you are only able to get a passport if you are, let's say, on a diplomatic mission, or if you, for example, if you have a job. So what everybody did was to work with brokers who come up with these little sheets of papers that says, oh, Matin or so-and-so has been offered a job, in this company. I mean, a 17-year-old, 18-year-old, no qualifications. Who is going to hire them in Singapore or Thailand? I'm sure the authorities know it, but, they were probably getting kickbacks. And one of the reasons why I felt especially, particularly sad about my grandpa's issue was because I couldn't even come back for the funeral when he passed away, because my sister did come back once while she had left, and they confiscated her passport, and it took months to get it back. So my parents were like, do not come back at all, at whatever cost. And it wasn't until about 8 or 9 years ago that things became a little bit easier.
Any other questions? Yep, Jerome, go ahead.
Hi, Kelly and Tim. Really enjoyed the presentation. It's lovely to see you freed from the shackles of daily bureau work.
Not for
I'm Jerome from AFP, news agency in Bangkok. I'm very aware that Kite Tales was about, giving voice to the people, the vox populi, as it were, and ordinary folks up and down the country. But I kind of have to ask, this year has been a very fascinating one for Myanmar. It's been a fairly rocky road for the new civilian administration. I'd love to get your views and insights into how optimistic you feel in the long term about Myanmar's future. Next 5 to 10 years, is this going to be a rare, peaceful transition success story, or is it trickier than that? Is it too early to say? I'd love to have your thoughts.
No, you've lived there long enough and covered it. Look, to be perfectly honest, it just depends on what side of the bed I woke up in the morning. Some days I'm extremely optimistic, some days I'm extremely pessimistic. Traveling the country, meeting people in the border regions, and seeing how much they're invested in this country, and the youth. Talking to young people who've helped us, who are really interested in it, makes me really optimistic that we have at least, a new generation of people who wants change and wants to do something about it. But, then you come back to Yangon, you see things that are going on with the new government, democratically elected, popularly elected government. And it's extremely disheartening. There just seems, personal opinion, there just seems to be a massive gap between the people, the ordinary people that we've spoken to on the ground, and what the direction of the country is going from that level. I just hope they can meet at some point. It's I voted for the first time in 2015. At the grand old age of 38. And it was a major moment for many of us who have never voted. And there was so much hope. And when the results came out, because there was a lot of fears, I'm sure you know that they were going to rig the elections. And when the results came out, we're like, oh my God, for once, this is going to happen. And then before that, the fear was, okay, so now the results is out, but will the handover of power actually going to happen? And then when that has happened, so it's like, people, one of my cousins said, it's almost like you are in the last, minute of a football game for like 9 months. You're like wanting it to be over, because you're like, oh my God, my team's going to lose, you know, and that's going to prolong for like 9 months. But then, since then, it's, you know, a lot of it, reality has set in for a lot of the people who were very hopeful, including myself. So yeah, on a good day, I feel optimistic. On quite a lot of other days, I'm really worried.
Yeah, I mean, I would just echo that. I mean, I think that the government, the country has a great deal of human potential. The diversity is amazing, and people have this great kind of, as well, entrepreneurial spirit, which is just what you have to do if your government doesn't really exist for so many years. But unfortunately, it seems that, I mean, partly it's because our expectations were too high. You know, we just wanted this fairy story, and no, they don't exist. But I think there are legitimate concerns that the government may be squandering this mandate. You know, that they're not doing enough with this huge political goodwill that they have from the country to really push through change. Whether or not that's a fair assessment, it's really hard to tell because they're not great communicators. So, you know, I mean, one of their leading advisors for the economy the other day was sort of grumbling about having to have a plan, and why should every developing country have to have a plan? And we were all a bit like, well, so that people know what's going on, you know, and what your vision is. So I think there's that disconnect slightly, and I think that there's a perception that the government is a bit in a bubble, and they may be doing some good stuff, but we just don't know what they're doing. So it's quite hard to work it out. I hope that's a decent enough answer.
Final question. So what now for Kite Tales, and what now for both of you?
Well, we have to go back to our jobs and earn some money. 9 months of unpaid leave was fantastic, but no, the Kite Tales will continue. We have enough stories that we, you know, I think, and then we're going to try and publish at least one story a week. You know, we've already got about 25 stories online, but we've got enough that will go on if we publish once a week until the rest of this year. So, you know, we've traveled almost all the states and quite a lot of the regions. So we have videos, photos, you know, text stories that we're going to continue to publish. And we're also in talks with a few different organizations on how we can, you know, make it sustainable. I mean, we might at some point start to have third-party content. We're talking to others who want to actually provide these kind of stories to our website. Personally, I think for both of us, what we would like to see Kite Tales as an educational resource, and we are talking to educational institutions to try and see how we can turn these stories into learning materials for children in Myanmar. I mean, I'd just love to be able to do something so that, you know, children can learn English language, but also interviewing skills, you know, listening skills, writing skills, and for them to then suddenly say, you know what, I want to go out and interview people on my street and write about it, and we'd love to feature that.
Yeah, I mean, we hope it keeps growing and that it will thrive and that people will be interested and they'll come and look at the website and follow us on Facebook, and that it starts to have a, you know, maybe just even a small, you know, drip, that people start thinking about their fellow countrymen, learning a little bit about what life is like, you know, even, you know, within Myanmar, because it's bilingual, so that you can read it in Burmese, and perhaps, you know, you grow up in Yangon, maybe you've not learned about someone who's growing up in the Naga region, and you don't know anything about their life, so maybe it just gives you a little insight. And for people who are from outside the country, we hope that it will show that it's not just about, you know, that the story has been so sort of focused on the politics, and as Thin said earlier, that's, you know, very, very valid, but that it shows that there's more to the country, and it really, you know, enriches people's understanding. I mean, hopefully in some small way anyway.
Great. Well, thank you both for being with us today. We are so glad you've been able to join us. Is there anything else you wanted to say? Okay. And thank you all for coming. And again, if you like what we're doing here, there are membership forms at the front. Gotta plug hard at the beginning of the year. All right, well, thank you very much. The bar will remain open, so please grab drinks. Thin and Kelly will be here for a little bit if you have extra questions you want to ask them personally. And thanks again for coming.